Anneliese Michel was born in 1952 in Klingenberg, Bavaria, Germany. She grew up in a strict Catholic family and was known to be intelligent and likable. When Anneliese was 16 years old, she experienced her first episode of losing consciousness. Later that night, she felt as if something was pressing down on her chest, pinning her to her bed. Similar events occurred over the next 3 years, and EEG brain scans and examinations found nothing wrong, although she was prescribed 2 medications to manage her symptoms. In 1973, things took a turn for the stranger. Anneliese heard knocking sounds in her bedroom that her sisters also heard. Even more alarming, Anneliese reported hearing a voice damning her to hell, and her mother witnessed her staring furiously at a statue of the Virgin Mary with eyes turned black, and her hands seeming to turn into thick paws with claws. In a neurological visit in September 1973, Anneliese described horrific visions of demon faces that were tormenting her and stated that she felt that the devil was inside her. She also reported smelling something that had the aroma of burnt feces, a stench that many around her reported smelling later on. Around this time, Anneliese's mother described these strange occurrences to Dr. Luthi, who reportedly advised them to consult a Jesuit, a claim that he later denied. The family searched for a priest and eventually found Father Alt. In November 1973, Anneliese met with a Freudian psychiatrist who diagnosed her as a neurotic with possible epilepsy. Another neurologist found no explanation for her condition. In subsequent months, Anneliese would continue to report experiencing demonic visions and speaking in strange voices. Anneliese, the woman referred to in the previous sentences, exhibited bizarre behavior, including not sleeping and praying fervently all night. She also ate spiders and flies and even licked her own urine up from the floor, destroyed rosaries, crucifixes, and holy pictures on the walls, and exhibited strength that was considered close to superhuman, throwing her sister as if she were a rag doll. Incredibly, she was observed effortlessly squeezing an apple with one hand, causing fragments to explode throughout the room. A priest named Father Rodwick, considered an expert on exorcisms by his peers, reported that he was convinced that Anneliese was possessed. After deliberation with the bishop, an exorcism on Anneliese was formally approved and was to be carried out by a priest named Father Renz. On September 24, 1975, the first exorcism rite was performed, and Father Renz allowed some of the exorcism sessions to be recorded. 42 audio recordings of the exorcisms were made in total, and some clips from those recordings are available to hear. Fair warning, however, these recordings are perhaps the most disturbing pieces of audio that some people have ever heard. Anneliese was exhibiting extraordinary strength, and her behavior was getting worse over time. She destroyed religious artifacts, crucifixes, and rosaries on the walls. Anneliese threw her sister as if she were a rag doll and crushed an apple into fragments with one hand. A priest named Father Rodwick believed Anneliese was possessed after being considered an expert on exorcisms, and after deliberation with the bishop, the exorcism on Anneliese was approved. Father Renz was the priest responsible for carrying out the exorcism. The first exorcism rite was performed on September 24, 1975. Some of the exorcism sessions were recorded and 42 audio recordings were made in total. Anneliese named Fleischmann as one of her demons, and her knowledge of the real Fleischmann was accurate. This detail came as a shock to Father Alt, who claimed Anneliese would have no way of knowing about Fleischmann. Anneliese exhibited different signs of possession, such as an aversion to the sacred, possessing inordinate physical strength, knowledge of hidden things, and epileptic-like seizures on the face and movement of the arms and legs. By May, Anneliese had started to hurt herself by banging her head against the wall and biting herself and others. Her family had to tie her up to prevent her from hurting herself, but most dangerously, Anneliese refused to eat, describing it as not being permitted to eat. Despite being frail and weighing less than 80 pounds, Anneliese exhibited incredible strength when people tried to restrain her. Her condition worsened over time, and by June, her entire face was sunk in, but she refused a doctor's visit despite having a high fever. On June 30th, Anneliese had another exorcism, only saying, "Please, absolution." The next morning, her family found her dead. Anneliese died at the age of 23 after enduring 67 exorcisms and weighed only 68 pounds at the time of her death. Anneliese's belief that she was possessed predates all the exorcisms or the priests. Anneliese's parents and the two priests were accused of negligent homicide after her death. The case went to trial in 1978, and the defense presented eyewitness testimony and submitted recordings as evidence of possession. They argued that Anneliese was allowed to deny medical treatment as it was her lawful right, which may have included treatments that were against her will. Family friend Thea Hine testified that Anneliese begged her to not suggest medical attention to anyone, and Father Alt looked for medical help towards the end. On May 30th, his friend Dr. Richard Roth visited Anneliese out of what he claimed was scientific curiosity, and not as a physician. Dr. Roth denied, saying, "There are no injections against the devil." The court seemed to overlook several facts that were presented to them, including the fact that Anneliese's pupils were unusually dilated and that she did not have any ulcers, which are frequently found on victims of starvation. The prosecution argued that Anneliese had epilepsy and psychosis and that the parents and two priests were liable for failing to save her life. The defense questioned the credibility of Father Alt, with the conclusion from two experts that Father Alt exhibited signs of schizophrenia. The court ruled in favor of the prosecution, sentencing the four defendants to 6 months in prison, with suspension for 3 years, and payment for all court costs. The court ruled that Anneliese was unable to make decisions for herself and should have been forced to submit to medical care. Professor Felicitas D. Goodman, an author of a book on the case, notes that the theories that Anneliese was epileptic were presented as a statement of undisputable fact, not conjecture, as in fact, they had been. Determining the difference between possession and mental health is a complex process that involves discernment by a team of experts, including a medical doctor, a clinical psychologist, and a psychiatrist. Formal exorcism only happens as a last resort. Some believe that both possession and mental health can occur simultaneously, and it is essential to determine the root cause of an individual's suffering. In the case of Anneliese, the evidence suggests that mental health played a significant role. However, some argue that she could have been possessed, given the strange occurrences and the voices she experienced. Nonetheless, regardless of the cause, it was crucial that Anneliese received medical attention. She should have been forced to go to a hospital and allowed the doctors to evaluate her.
Thank you for watching the story. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new upload. If you're feeling brave enough, leave a comment and let us know which story was the most frightening for you. And if you have any horror stories of your own that you'd like to share, we'd love to hear them.